Well, first of all, good afternoon. Welcome along to Manx Radio's Mannin Line. This is where we want to hear from you on whatever topic is getting your goat. It's open line through till 1. Alex sitting in for Andy today. He's got home with a bit of a gruff throat. 66 13 68 is the number to call. If you're a first-time caller, it'd be lovely to hear from you. What topics are on the agenda at the moment? Well, we're getting maybe a new hotel in Douglas, but no parking. Public transport's going to take the strain, but didn't we actually cancel, or shall we say put on hold, the reinstatement of public transport to that end of the promenade? Okay. Do you have a view on it, okay? Do you feel that the new hotel in the Royalty Building would be a good thing? Okay, we all fondly remember, was it Chipperton's that used to be in the Royalty Cinema there, and then when they demolished that, they rebuilt that building, and it is a fine-looking building. It's going to be a 64-bedroom hotel, and it's been unanimously approved, but there is a shortage of car parking spaces. But apparently, that is quite the norm in the UK. But the UK, of course, has modern rail links in towns and cities, and we have the bus service with no bus station because we still can't get that sorted. So, question is, what do you think? Good idea or bad idea? Do get in touch and let me know. Get on the phone to 66 13 68. We'd love to hear from you on that. Quite a few people texting me in. Thank you to G and also to Francis regarding the headline in the Isle of Man Courier last week. Cannon's freebies. I didn't have to declare them, the Chief Minister says. This includes things like VIP tickets for the TT, a bottle of Bushmills whiskey, biscuits, table mats, and a motorbike helmet. Okay, these are some of the gifts given to Alfred Cannon, MHK, since he became Chief Minister in 2021, according to the Isle of Man Courier. And Francis said, Cannon's freebies, if this is what alleged the Chief Minister has been in receipt of, why weren't the other 23 members there as well with their vested interests? Looks like Alf was hung out to dry on that one. Of course, because you do have to declare interests as an MHK, of course. G takes the other side of it, saying, I note an MHK has said it's okay for them to accept gifts and not declare them. That's okay then. Saves Treasury worrying about government financial regulations. What's your opinion? Do you think they're just targeting the Chief Minister? Or do you think these things need to be declared? I'd love to hear from you. 66 13 68. Do get in touch on that or any other topic at the moment that is exercising your mind. Peter Murcott's straight on to 66 13 68. Peter, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, Alex. A couple of things. First of all, briefly, I just wanted to congratulate Stephen Moore for his contribution last week. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. And if anybody can get into the playback, they would probably benefit from listening to it. He gave an excellent explanation and information about the United Nations statement on freedom of the individual, freedom of expression, and so on. And really the basis of what he was speaking about is one that's very dear to my heart as well, is that there's a great danger of freedom of expression being curtailed, certainly in the British Isles. And so it was very, very relevant to our situation, and I want to thank him for what he said. But that wasn't primarily the point of the call. I'm doing some research about a former Methodist New Connection church, which is in Derby Road. It was still quite recently, it was the Red Cross. Mm-hmm. People will probably recognise it. Then I think it's now owned by Manx Youth Band. Now, that became it was built in 1890, and strangely, it closed as a church in 1914, and it was then went into the ownership of St Thomas's eventually, who used it as church hall. The point is, there's a dearth of material about it. There are no minute books in the Manx Museum, which normally would have, no trustees' books, no cash books or anything like that, except for one for the church in Ramsey, which isn't relevant. And I just wondered if there's anybody in the community, perhaps whose ancestor had some connection with that church and has any information whatsoever. I put together a booklet, but it's always open to some more useful contributions, especially, and this is the bit that's the puzzle, why did it close? There was just a one-liner of a statement in the local press in 1914, just said, Derby Road Church is going to close on such and such a day, but no reason given.
Oh, it's interesting because it's a striking building. I know it well, as you say. It's now currently used by the Manx youth band, Manx Concert Brass. Do you think it had anything to do with the outbreak of war, in the fact that by the time that it was going to be used for other circumstances, and by the time that hostilities has ended, it was no longer viable and had found a different use?
No, I don't think so, because I wrote a booklet some years ago called While the War Was On, based on the effect upon the war and looking at sermons and things that were going on in Manx churches. In actual fact, in 1914, the end of 1914, they were running, by the time this church had closed, they were running a Back to Church campaign.
All right.
Which ran into the early part of 1915. So I don't think it was that. It's just a mystery, and try as I might, I can't fathom what exactly the reason was. It's got a very, very interesting background, and I've discovered quite a lot on the way. For example, before they built it, they teamed up with an organisation that came to the Isle of Man called the Hallelujah Band. And the Hallelujah Band and the originators of this church teamed up, and then they built the chapel. And it, as I say, it only lasted just a quarter of a century, which is very short. And as I say, I'm going to give an address on it. I've got a lot of information, but I would be very glad if there was any more. If somebody had got some, perhaps, I don't know, knows where the ancient minute book was, which would tell us a lot,
Okay.
Or anything like that.
So, Peter, if people want to get in touch with you, because it sounds like quite a detective story you're going to be undertaking there, how do they get in touch with you if they've got any information on the Methodist
Yeah, if they've got any information, 611 483.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Peter. Lovely to speak to you. Take care.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
bye. So Peter Murcott there, who's doing some investigation on the Methodist Church. Yeah, I think most of us know it as the Red Cross building. It is now the home of the Manx Concert Brass, Manx Youth Band up there. Quite a striking building, but Peter's doing some research into the fact that it was quite short-lived, a quarter of a century just for a church building to remain in that purpose. So, if anyone's got any information regarding its history, do get in touch with him. I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. What else are we talking about? Thank you to people who are, let's have a look, getting in touch regarding the Royalty building becoming a hotel. Norman, thank you for your text, Norman. And does the Royalty building not have underground parking? There is further details, actually, in our news report on manxradio.com that says the plans to convert the office building into a 64-bed hotel have been unanimously approved, but there were concerns over parking. The ground floor conversion, coming at a loss of 13 spaces, were actually discussed at this morning's planning committee meeting. However, members said many UK hotels have no parking provision and the plans will be great for the island, great for Douglas. Are you happy to see this hospitality? Many hotels in the UK are by lots of NCP car parks. Now, the one thing we're short of in Douglas, of course, is car parking space, generally. Has this not taken into account the wider context of Douglas? And let's be honest, we don't have a myriad of transport links. There's no bus station, okay, just that row of rusting shelters. And in terms of rail links, we're still waiting for them to put the rail link back along the promenade, which we were assured at the time of the promenade's redevelopment would be future-proof for modern light rail, the kind of things that these comparative UK hotels have in a lot of places at their door. What's this? G says, a local news site notes a rental agreement was signed with Orsted in 2015. So does anyone knows where the income is shown in published government accounts? G, come back to me with the evidence on that one. I would like to see the link. Alan has said, the government says there's no money to maintain the footpaths. Lots of hikers come here bringing money, yet they have an endless amount to waste on wind power. Your opinion there, of course, Alan. I would imagine there is a very big difference, isn't there, between investment for the long term when it comes to investing in green energy and a lot of projects in the short term. But yeah, we are. I mean, I'm speaking very personally here. I'm sick and tired of the constant mantra of there's not enough money. There's not enough money. We're almost talking ourselves into decline, aren't we? That actually, instead of talking about cost, let's talk about value. Okay, and things that matter to the everyday person. Okay, and maybe lots of things that in an office, on a statistics sheet or part of a strategy, doesn't mean anything to people on the street. Okay, where would you prefer the money go? Okay, so I'm after your opinions. Give me a call. 66 13 68. It's always better to talk than having to decipher text. Howard's done just that. He's on the line. Hello, Howard. How are you today?
Hi, Alex. Just listen to Peter Murcott. I can remember that church hall on St. Thomas's Church, because that's where we were raised, in St. Thomas's Church, down, well, quite literally where the car park is down there in Chester Street. But I can remember the church hall being the church hall. But perhaps Peter Murcott or some of your listeners might be able to answer this. I also remember on Circular Road, now you may remember the Central Motors, the garage that used to be there.
Yes.
Well, there used to be on that land a church, the Siemens Bethel. And I remember as a young lad going there, and it was an official church, so to speak, if you want to use those terms, but it was closed down, must have been the 1960s, or well before that, the late 50s, early 60s. It was closed down and knocked down, and it became the Central Motors, and it has since been knocked down again, and I think it was the Philatelic Bureau that went there. But it's a red brick building that's on that site now. But the Siemens Bethel, I've been to a service in there, and I've still got the picture of the inside of that building in my mind. It never left me with the balcony and everything that was in. So if Peter Murcott is on sometime and he's talking about, perhaps he can just open it up, or any of your listeners, if they have any information on it.
Okay, thank you for that one, Howard. Yeah, we'll open that up if anyone has any further information. Yeah, It is amazing when you look through the maps of old Douglas, and if you're going way back. I was doing a lot of this during lockdown because I was bored, and went on the Eye Museum. And there are things like churches and other buildings that you can either see on old black and white photographs in the skyline of Douglas, and
that's right,
they've just completely disappeared as if they never existed. They've been swollen up by back streets or redevelopment over the years, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was asking a question yesterday for between what was the Picture House and the Strand Cinema, that was Guthrie Gable. Mm-hmm. They've moved the Guthrie Gable over now officially. It's opposite W.H. Smith's. There's a cutting through from back Strand Street to Strand Street. But if you walked up the original Guthrie Gable, you would come to a blacksmith's right at the top of that little lane, and it was Jockham's, the blacksmiths. Mm. And as a child, as I say, we lived down there in the Chester Street, Edward Lane, Finch Road area, all that area. And we used to go down to watch the blacksmiths working down there.
That would have been fascinating to watch.
It was, because, Osborne's Carpets, old Georgie Osborne, he used to have horses down there by the Greba Works in what was a big garage. And I don't know what you call them, but there's these ones with the big wheels on, and you sit right back in them. Mm. And he used to go along the promenade with these, sitting like racing, like a chariot. Yeah, they were. He had the horses down there, kept them in the stables in the back of the garage, and had these. There is a name on them offhand, I can't think of what it is, but he would go along the promenade with these horses stepping, and they were brilliant.
Wow. I have to ask, Howard, the original Guthrie Gable, was it as grim and run down and sort of dirty as the current one?
Yes, but it was a different type of dirt.
The nostalgic dirt.
There was no coffee cups and everything else. It was just general grime because all the coal fires and the general melange down there. But the Guthrie Gable, that cut right down through Market Street, it's virtually under what would be TK Maxx now.
Yes. Yeah, because I think
George Ridgway's the jewellers at one side, and then he was between the Strand Cinema, which is TK Maxx, and the Picture House, which was demolished.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you for that, Howard. Yeah, we'll put the request out. If anyone's got any memories, do get in touch. So thank you very much for that.
Siemens Bethel, it was called.
Siemens Bethel. Right. If anyone knows, cheers, Howard. Do take the time to give us a call and let us know. 66 13 68. Love to hear from you. Julian's on. Julian, this took you 22 minutes to call me today. What have you been up to?
Oh, I was just listening to the dulcet tones of Peter Murcott and Howard, and I totally agree with everything they say every time they're on, which is interesting, especially about freedom of expression. But one of the bits you mentioned was spending. There's an FOI that's come up that's quite interesting. The Wardell Armstrong Bird Survey, I don't think they've hardly put a spade in the ground for the Erie Stain study. How much do you think government has spent on that, according to a recent FOI?
Well, I'll tell you now that I haven't checked it out myself, so it will be a finger in the air. Go on, tell me.
$2.25 million.
But we haven't got enough money for everything, you remember, Julian, at the moment.
Oh, well, hang on a minute. That's $2.25 million, and according to the FOI, that is not staffing for all the Wardell, the hotels, the flights, sundries, which will be all that stuff, and not VAT. And you're talking about some engineers being brought over in the near future for drilling to check for bedrock. So $2.25 million sounds like that's the very, very start of this.
The question I put to you, Julian, on that one is that when we had the gas pipeline put in, which we know all the problems with the unauthorised loans and things like this, but the gas line put in our brand new power station, we were talking hundreds of millions. I think, I'm not going to be, I will check this out, but it was circa something like 350 million, I think, for the whole project. So is this not just the cost, the going rate of doing major infrastructure projects like this? Because in the Isle of Man, we talk ourselves up very much as a nation, but in terms of big infrastructure projects, most of our big infrastructure projects are quite small compared to big international projects. So is $2.25 million maybe a drop in the ocean for a part of what is going to be an investment into the long term, which is going to cost?
Well, it depends what you're going to get out of it at the end. I mean, at least with gas, what did the energy transition lead say? We've had the most resilient energy grid in Europe. What we're talking about now is not exactly reliable energy. There's an interesting document that's out. If anybody looks for a professor of economics in Edinburgh, Professor Gordon Hughes, if you look for a title called Wind Power Economics, Rhetoric and Reality, he mentions large projects that always seem to go over, like HS2 is currently 3 times over what it was originally touted at. And of course, we've had something similar with the Liverpool ferry terminal. He's also saying that the reality of these wind turbines is, the onshore ones, you've got a 20% catastrophic failure rate within the first 5 years. The first 2 years, they will produce the energy that they theoretically should produce, which is a lot less than what's being touted for Erie Stain. I'm talking about what all the other jurisdictions around the UK. So if you have 5 turbines, one of them will have a catastrophic failure within 5 years. Offshore is significantly worse, with a 60% failure rate within 5 years and an 80% failure rate within 8 years.
How does that compare to the gas power station? Because there are times when, we don't realise it as the end user. There are times when we're on the interconnector for the gas power station to go down and have repair work and things like this. How does it compare with what we've got? Because whilst that those stats very much suit your argument, what's the other side of it? As in the traditional power generation methods of gas, oil, even coal, I suppose. They do have failures. They're not completely impregnable. So we rely on this backup extension cable we got plugged into the UK at Bispam. So how does it compare?
Well, what you're going to have is, I mean, at the moment, I understand that they're talking about having another one connected to the island at £350 million.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly like we've got fivers coming out of our back pocket. The UK are paying $60 billion for a rewire, which we will have to do. And as a rule of thumb, you divide by 1,000 for the Isle of Man. So there's $60 million on top of the 350 to rewire the island so it can handle the vagaries of the weather. So you're then having a wind farm that is touted at 36 million. You've got $2.25 million spent already on a consultancy that hasn't even put a spade in the ground yet. So we're looking at over 500 million for something that's going to produce a tiny amount of our electricity. At least with the gas, we've had everything we need. And how long is that for? Now, the other thing with these wind farms is, according to Professor Hughes, you get to the point at 15 years where, unless you're prepared to completely replace it, I had a chat with Andy about this the other day with Trigger's brush. If you haven't completely replaced 3/4 to all of it, which of course is a huge cost, there is no point at 15 years in continuing with it without levelling the whole thing and then restarting. So from memory, Pool Rose has been going since 2003, and it's now 2024, and there's at least another 10 years life in it, if not more, if it's serviced properly. So when you factor in the longevity is a lot less for these wind farms, even from an economic point of view, especially for investors, it makes no economic sense.
So I have to ask then, Julian, you're a regular call to the Mannin Line. We're all very aware of your opinion of wind farms. We aren't going to be able to continue to burn fossil fuels, end of. So what is your... We can be critical of the route that's been taken and how expensive it is. What is your solution? What are you proposing instead?
A bit of truth on the other side. You say end of for fossil fuels. Why is that? Well, I mean, if you look at the actual, all we're doing is we're offshoring all our pollution to China and India. Nobody's going over there and protesting over there about the fact that they're producing so much of our stuff, and they have a lot less stringent air pollution controls than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to ask the question, if we're talking about net zero for the whole planet, if we're just offshoring everything to a country that doesn't really care about human rights, particularly, it appears, like the Uyghurs, as Andy mentioned the other day, what are we doing?
But we are. Let's be honest. We can't, inflate our role in the world. We are very, very small fry. So for the Isle of Man, if we are going to have to be net zero, or at least reduce emissions and not be able to burn fossil fuels, yes, they're effectively trading off carbon, effectively, getting it out of our backyard, which a lot of governments do. The Welsh government, in terms of mining coal I know this from Heritage Railways, you can't get Welsh steam coal anymore, so they could tick it off their box of not mining it. You have to get steam coal now from Poland, which has a bigger carbon footprint, but it makes the Welsh government's tick list look good because they've got rid of it from their backyard. So in terms of the Isle of Man, if we have to not burn fossil fuels, what is the answer? Okay, because we're not going to be able to change our little island, the world economic platform, and stop sending money to China and things like this. So what can we do to ensure that we keep the lights on?
What's wrong with Kroger?
Well, once again, that's gas. That's fossil fuels again, isn't it?
But it's within our jurisdiction, and we could do whatever we like with it if we wanted to. We don't have to kowtow to the rest of the world on this. If you've got your own, there's plenty of other jurisdictions. I don't see Qatar or Oman or any of these places, or Dubai or Abu Dhabi. They're not kowtowing to, we can't use fossil fuels. I mean, they're using more now than they were before 2015.
So you're proposing then that the Manx government effectively go against the climate science and their international obligations in the Western world to try and reduce emissions, and just effectively stick two fingers up and say, "Nah, we're going to carry on burning." We're
thankful. Look at what we're being asked to do. If you look at the US, their electrical generation now is somewhere around 10% is supported by wind, although they're having massive problems now. And of course, that's why they've officially, I think yesterday, written off the Ørsted offshore one off New Jersey. But they've basically displaced, I think, 10% of their electrical use, let alone anything else. And now all of a sudden we're being asked to do 30%, which is what they're saying, a third of our electrical use within a few years. I mean, that's not exactly proportional when you think that America, over all the last 20 years, has only managed to shift 10% of theirs. Why are we being suddenly asked to move 3 times faster? Well, not even faster, because we were asked to do this in just a few short years. But if America is only doing 10%, why are we doing 30%, a tiny island that wouldn't even move the needle on 0.0001% of the world's CO2 emissions?
But
we believe that CO2 is a pollutant.
But also, you're making it sound like we're a spoilt brat there. You know, we're not going to do it because it's too big a challenge for us. I mean, that if and I'm playing devil's advocate on purpose here, if we are committed as a country and our government, you know, democratically elected government said that we need to reduce emissions, we can't keep burning gas. I'm back to my first question to you. What else? What's your option? If you don't go for wind power, what is the option that you're suggesting? If the option of continuing to burn fossil fuels is not on your table,
well, nuclear is horrendously expensive. Mm-hmm. All the small modular reactors that Rolls-Royce are doing are 10 years away, all spoken for. I think it's 16 of them which will have about 10 times more power than we need. And then, of course, you've got planning that takes at least 10 years to convince the public to have a nuclear reactor. And I've got no problem with the safety record on nuclear reactors. I mean, people worry about Chernobyl, but I mean, that test was ridiculous. You've got no storage solution that makes any sense unless you want to spend $4 billion on batteries for the island. Mm-hmm. You know, we talk about sand batteries and water and this type of thing, but, you know, horrendously expensive. Tiny scale. No one's done it at commercial scales yet. There is no storage solution. So I don't know. You know, if everyone's running towards the waterfall and you're going in the other direction, they'll all call you crazy, won't they?
Yeah, I admit there is that argument. However, there are other occasions when everyone's running towards the waterfall, and you might have just decided to take the wrong decision and everyone ran there correctly because you don't know. This is the problem. This is the problem with opinions, isn't it? That on occasion, the one person who stands out is right. On occasion, the one person who stands out is wrong. And you can only really find that out with hindsight, can't you?
Professor Gordon Hughes, who is the professor of economics at Edinburgh, who's really looked into this for many years now, mm-hmm. He's saying that the renewables, like solar and wind, is going to cause a bubble burst that will make 2008 look like a picnic.
Well,
because look at all the investment in ESG.
Yeah.
KPMG, Ernst & Young, Deloitte. Imagine if it then turns out, he's saying people will have to get used in 10 years' time, if this keeps going, to £5,000 to £6,000 a year energy bill just for your electricity if this keeps going the trajectory that it's going.
Okay. There's one message that comes in that from Texter 653 who says, more misinformation from Julian. The UK isn't spending 60 billion on just rewiring. It's about grid resilience, updating old infrastructure and enabling Scotland to export excess energy to England. Is that true, Julian?
Absolutely correct, yeah. If you're making all the wind energy in the north, instead of having nice power stations where you need them, you're throwing your generators up in Scotland, but where do most people live? London, southern England. So you've got a wiring bottleneck called the B6 boundary at the Scottish border with England, and they haven't got enough. Well, I mean, how much mining for the copper is this going to take to get that through? £60 billion worth of it is rewiring at the end of the day. I mean, you can call it what you like. They can't get that energy down to England without spending an absolute fortune. So you've got all the overhead, the CO2 emissions of digging all that copper out.
I would imagine I'd imagine there's quite a bit of politics involved in that, in the fact the Scottish want to export energy across to that. So the Scottish Parliament will probably be leaning on Westminster rather hard for that.
Yeah, but don't forget, the energy isn't necessarily coming when you need it. And if you don't have a storage solution, that's when you have this thing called curtailment, where they've got to turn them off because everyone's asleep, but there's a storm up in the north the energy cannot be stored. You could try sending it across to a different jurisdiction, but it's not that far. So in general, if it's windy on the Isle of Man, it's going to be windy in England, it's going to be windy in Ireland. So if you say, oh, well, we can export the electricity from our windy bit, well, they may not want it, or they might give you nothing for it.
Yeah, good point. Have you ever been to Electric Mountain, by the way, in Wales?
I passed it, actually, but I haven't been in it.
What we want is a whole nation full of those, Julian, because, that is quite an interesting bit of renewable energy. I know I've only seen it once, the idea of the massive underground cavern that apparently only ever gets turned on to sort out the Coronation Street advert break surge that's needed for everyone putting their kettles on.
Again, as you say, short term, and don't forget, pumping water uphill into caverns is horrendously
expensive.
Energy. So you use more energy pumping it back up than you get out of it. But for short term, it's okay. But, if you have 8 or 9 days where there's no wind and it's overcast, what are you going to do?
Cut off Coronation Street.
Well, and just have ice lattes instead.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much, Julian. Lovely to speak to you. I'm going to get on to some further calls. But always great to speak to Julian. And, Bonzo is on. I haven't spoken to him in ages. Hello, Bonzo.
Hello. Yes. Now, there was I wanting to talk about kittens and anomalous aerial phenomena and things like that.
Yes.
But, oh dear, I'm going to have to talk about what Julian's been talking about, haven't I?
All yours.
Going back. What is it? Yes, it's a bit Groundhog Day for me, this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Groundhog Year. All right, well, let's get to one bit first. Julian saying about, the dreadful 50 million, which will, 60 million, which will need to harden our electricity supply on the Isle of Man for renewables. Well, that's actually budgeted for. It's in the Curran report.
But I think Julian's point is that whether it's budgeted for or not, is it money that we need to spend? Is it or is it value for money? I think is his point there. That it could cost however much.
Well, I think the distribution system is in need of renewal anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So how far that is additional spending and how much that is planned spending.
Do you feel
is another thing? I mean, it's like when some people sort of say, "Oh, it's going to cost us 1 billion to do this, or 1.02 billion." But no, 1.02 billion is the amount of money that it's going to cost us over the next 10 years if we don't do anything at all other than what we're doing now.
So, in fairness, are we talking then about a cost over a number of years as opposed to how much it's going to cost per year, sort of thing?
Yes, that's right. What's the term? Amortized.
Yes, amortized. Yes. Oh, there's an accountant's term. Crikey.
So that took me back some years when I was working on such legislation. So I'll get the flashbacks in a minute.
Exactly. So, Bonzo, to sort of pull this into one message, because I've got quite a few messages to go through. In terms of the renewables, we obviously know your position on this, but do you think wind power is the way to go? Do you think the government should be looking at other forms of wind power, or does Julian have a point, which is that when it comes to being able to turn the Isle of Man net zero and the planet net zero, that we could spend an absolute fortune bankrupting ourselves and the planet will be no better off because the big boys are doing what they want?
Right, well, first off, nobody's ever said that wind power is the 100% solution to the problem.
Okay.
Because, well, obviously it couldn't be. But what it allows you to do is it's part of a mix of other renewables and the stuff that we're still using now. And it allows you then to help use less of the polluting stuff that we're using now, whilst we've got that bit of the renewables, and then we go to other forms of renewables, optimizing solar and actually energy. The other part of the coin, which nobody seems to be talking about very much, is actually saving energy.
Yeah, which of course saves people's money, and you'd have thought...
Oddly enough, yeah.
Yeah, and you'd have thought that's always popular, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and as for the new interconnector spending 300, well, that's because that has to be. The interconnector has a service life, and in order to have an interconnector capacity, we'll have to have a new interconnector.
It is something that I've always noticed seems to be very common across the Isle of Man, is that we never like to spend money on maintenance. We like to let things rot until they cost an absolute fortune to replace. And then we're always up in arms at the big cost, as opposed to doing running maintenance and keeping things in good condition. So yeah, in terms of the interconnector, yeah, I suppose there's a point. It's not going to last forever under the sea, is it?
No, and the other thing, of course, it's we don't have money. No. It's not that we don't have money. It's we get back to this basic principle of we don't tax enough the people who are wealthy enough, and organisations who are wealthy enough in order to pay the tax. So, of course, we're not going to have the money, but it's not a question of it not being there. It's a choice by government for us not to raise it.
Do you feel, though, that if they raised it, we might be in a worse economic position that actually would put people off coming here, because we're trying to be competitive as a low-tax jurisdiction with a high cost of living already, and that we don't have the same services and things that people can enjoy in a more populous environment? There is this element of always having to get off the rock.
Well, for 80% of the population, working and living here is not competitive. It's more expensive than doing it in the UK. For those who come here for tax reasons, etc., it's a very attractive proposition, and still will be. Even, when Labour have sorted out what they're doing. Tax in the UK isn't it? Top rate of tax in the UK. It's never going to go below 40%. We can have a tax competitive system here which taxes the wealthiest at 27%, something like that, and it still makes it a very competitive offering. And people stay here because, they like the familiarity of it, and it's also close to UK, so they can see friends and family when they can get a boat, when they can get an aircraft.
Yes.
But they can do that rather than, there's a reason why such wealthy people are here, and it's not because of the nightlife, and it's not because of the sunshine.
Okie dokie. Well, it's a very good point. Thank you very much for that, Bonzo. I'm going to get on now and move on to another caller in a moment. But do keep your comments coming in. Let's have a quick look through some text just before I take an ad break. Steve's been on saying, Alex, why can't we just connect to the UK or Northern Irish electricity grid at multiple points? I can't understand why we need to generate our own energy via the MUA. The Channel Islands gets their energy via undersea interconnections into the French grid, which is predominantly nuclear and relatively cheap per kilowatt. The MUA should become a last mile grid supplier, not a power generator. Well, is that the point? Have we got to this point in the island's history where really we don't shouldn't be completely self-sufficient when it comes to power? We can just plug ourselves in. Technology has allowed us to get to that point. Are we just doing it out of sheer stubbornness or national pride that we need to power our own energy? There was the same argument in terms of Manx care. We spend an absolute fortune running hospitals and services and things like that, whereas could we effectively run a smaller cottage-style hospital that would deal with emergency procedures and emergency operations and things like that, but everything else is flown to the UK and we pay for it private in the UK with taxpayers' money? Would that work out cheaper? Are we just clinging to the idea that we have to be self-sufficient because we're an island? Yeah, it works both ways. And I imagine certain people are very, very, very passionate about keeping us separate. G, can't find the link for the Orsted story. Thank you, G. John says, Alex, will the government have enough money to buy a fleet of e-buses? Perhaps they can make all the money they use from the doorbell camera tax. Thank you very much for that. Pat says the island's financial situation now and for the unforeseen future cannot afford to meet the climate controls. Even if they did, the running costs would be more than our GDP. Yeah, there's never enough money until it's for a project we're keen on. Then money seems to be no object. Okay, how much have we spent in the last 4 or 5 years on our sea routes, sea links, steam packet, ferry terminals, everything else. Is it topping near 400 million? Somewhere like that. So there is always money when we need it. Let's have a look. Thank you very much to 822. It says, what about all the big houses and farms in the country that have big stocks of wood outside for their log burners? When are they going to join the climate change fight? Thank you for that. Obviously, scientifically proven anecdotal evidence there. And Ian's been on. It says, considering the island's global carbon emissions are virtually unmeasurable, I have asked the question as to the island's global carbon footprint to no avail. Wouldn't it be prudent for the island to wait 10 or 15 years and see what new, more effective and dependable technologies are developed? It's a good point, Ian, but the question is, are we doing something that the Isle of Man's very good at and just kicking it down the road into the long grass? Okay? What's your opinion on this or any other topic? Okay, government spending when it comes to the development of the new hotels, the economic strategy, attracting more people to the island, or cannons freebies, as the Isle of Man courier put it. Give me a call, 66 13 68.
Ellen Vannin Fuels promotes road safety and would like to thank their customers for their understanding about restricted access and deliveries on and around the mountain course during this year's Manx Grand Prix. Safety first with Ellen Vannin Fuels.
Oh, not again.
Oh, that Jack from next door really needs to improve his left foot.
Oh, don't worry. The storm did the damage last time, and it was easy to get a greenhouse pane from Manx Glass and Glazing.
Manx Glass and Glazing don't just do the big jobs. Visit them on Snowborough Trading Estate for all your glazing repairs and supplies. From glass tabletops and picture frame glass to greenhouse glazing, along with good old-fashioned customer service and product knowledge.
Manx Glass and Glazing. You're smashing.
The Ramsey Garden Centre sale is now on, featuring a huge range of garden items at vastly reduced prices. Don't delay. Grab a garden bargain now. There has never been a better time to visit Ramsey Garden Centre. Open 7 days a week on Albert Road, Ramsey.
Looking for the perfect phone? Manx Telecom have got you covered. From easy-to-use Emporia flip phones to the top-of-the-line iPhone 15 Pro Max with a 48-megapixel camera, we have a phone for everyone. Save up to £288 when you purchase alongside a tariff. Save even more when you trade in your old handset and spread the cost too with prices from just £4 per month. Come and see the full range in store and visit mt.im for full details, terms and conditions.
Spectrum Windows. If your house needs a new look and your windows let in rain, keep those cold breezes out and make it look like new again. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Quality through and through. Great work guaranteed to you. Spectrum Windows, Spectrum Windows. Spectrum Windows.
Wedding planners and photographers looking for a truly unique backdrop for wedding photography? Then consider the historic Queen's Pier in Ramsey for a stunning coastal backdrop for truly memorable photographs. It offers a fantastic location to photographers in exchange for an affordable donation. Visit the Queen's Pier Restoration on Facebook, or to discuss photo opportunities, call Graham on 355 104. That's 355 104. This audio has been kindly sponsored by Paul Carey & Sons.
People of the Isle of Man, are you thinking of buying or selling a home? Well, wait! You need to talk to the conveyancing team at LVW Law. LVW Law! They've over 20 years of experience and know what they're talking about. They're friendly and efficient. Do not buy or sell a property without calling LVW Law on 836757 for a no-obligation quote. LVW Law.
The Mannin Line, daily interaction, debate and exchange of ideas. Broadcast on Manx Radio from midday till 1, Monday to Friday.
Thanks to the texter 929 who says, what do we do with our rubbish on Ireland? Do you still burn it? How does that sit with climate change? And if it's climate friendly, shouldn't we be using this to generate power? Yes, we do. It's called the Energy from Waste plant for a reason. It is effectively a rubbish-powered power station, okay? So, yes, we do. How does it fit with climate change? Well, that's a very good question. He's been waiting patiently. Robert's on the line to talk about residency cards. Hello, Robert.
Hi there. I'll just talk a little bit about my view on climate change, if that's okay, for a second.
Go on, far away. You've got a few minutes and then we're running out of time, so go on.
Right, so I think it's about energy autonomy. I think we need to get our gumption together and get house by house, street by street, village by village, town by town, city by city, and just go and have a knock on people's doors and ask them whether or not they want solar panels and give them an allowance to do that. I think that's the only way you can do it is, person by person, mouth by mouth.
And do you think that would be worth the money that would be involved in doing that? Because it's quite a hefty cost, isn't it?
Well, if you think about it, it's the same logic as when the food runs out, when the ships aren't able to come with the shelves and stuff like that. Energy autonomy is something that Alf kind of actually latched onto, and he thought, well, that's a great idea, we could do that. But he doesn't know how, and he doesn't know the right way to go about it. What they need is a crack team. If you got Climate.35 or, I don't know, just giving a few ideas out there or something to, put the flag up the flagpole and have a crack team that went round and actually, went house to house and actually had a talk with people and say, well, how do you want to do this? Is this possible? Then you'd be able to do it. And they have people under 30 that's able to do that. Now, my other point is, if I could just come in, is we don't have a residency card that works on international sites like eBay and things like that. So it's a separate topic, and I'm going off field here, but I've got a residency card, which is a bus pass, and unless you have a driving license or a passport, it's kind of like Miss Isle of Man or something like that. You just don't get accepted by any of these organisations with proof of ID. We should really have, at this stage, a residency card for people who live on the island to avail of and make use of international use.
Because you find this obviously with the increase in people like eBay. I know full well that with my Groundle Railway hat on, that eBay has not acknowledged it as a registered charity since April, even though they've said it'll take 2 or 3 days to sort, because of course they don't recognise the Isle of Man as being able to register charities because we're not in the UK. Do you feel it's time that actually we need to start punching above our weight in terms of getting these tech giants to actually identify us as a country?
Well, we missed out, didn't we? We kind of missed out on the .com. I think it was a bit trade allure at the time. We missed out on a lot of opportunity there. I think there's a few small bits of low-hanging fruit if we could bring them in line and have a few more tech-savvy businesses here. But, I mean, the vast majority is finance, and always will be. So, I mean, to get over that hurdle, it massively in those organisations over here, and then just work from the way in, from inwards to outwards, and encompass those geographic zones into their websites as you see fit. Yeah. But at the moment, if you look at eBay, we're right down the bottom. If you click on addresses, we're the lowest of the low. We're right down the bottom. We're hardly a footnote,
Yeah, I'd like a footnote at the bottom. Thanks so much for that, Robert. Very good point. I do like the idea of effectively having the Manx Avengers going around people's houses installing solar panels. That's a brilliant idea. Thank you very much to Peter Kelly. He of Kelly's Eye, by the way, you can hear after the Mannin Line on Wednesday. But he's given me a whole load of information about the Siemens Bethel. I haven't got time to read it out now, but if it's me tomorrow or Andy tomorrow or Beth tomorrow, who knows, we'll try and get to that. Thank you very much to Texter 376. Keep it nice, okay? Behave yourselves, okay? The Mannin Line is for, highbrow debate of different opinions and ideas, not to insult each other, okay? Thank you very much to 645, who says, scrap wind turbine, scrap the power station, scrap drilling for gas, and scrap Manx Telecom too. Just scrap everything. Thank you for your company. And thank you for being gentle and kind. Christy's up next with 1 to 3. I might be back at 3 o'clock. Who knows with today?